Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lucy Delgaudio, and I'm a Special Programs Manager for Minority Veterans of America. And welcome to our Minority Veterans of America Project Thrive panel, Minority Vets in Government Careers After Service. We're so excited that you could join us to discuss this and peek into the lives and experiences of a few of many minority veterans who have continued to serve in the government sector following their military service. For some, this includes navigating complexities of finding a role in the government sector while holding marginalized veterans' identities. Tonight's panel includes some incredible minority veterans from across government careers here to discuss their experiences as minority veterans transitioning from service in uniform to a whole new type of service, public service, as civilians. Each has been successfully charting and navigating their ways to reach the place that they are at today, in spite of challenges, obstacles, and barriers. Tonight's panel is part of a series hosted by Project Thrive, the Minority Vets Economic Empowerment Program, working to advance the career and economic interests of minority veterans in our community. I want to welcome you all. I'm going to do a quick introduction of all this fabulousness that's on our screen today. And thank you so much for joining me. First, we have Quinn Galloway Salazar, who is the co-director of the Substance and Abuse Mental Health Services Administration for service members, veterans, and their families, Technical Assistance Center, Policy Research, and Associates. Did I get all that in one mouthful? Okay, awesome. We have Marcy Hodge, Senior Policy Advisor for Women's and Girls in the Middle East, U.S. State Department. Thank you, Marcy, for being here with us today. And we have Kayla Williams, Assistant Secretary, Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs, Department of Veteran Affairs. Thank you, Kayla, for joining me tonight. I want to do this as informally as possible because, you know, we're all in this space and I just want to be as transparent and just as casual as possible. So, you know, let's kickstart it. So, Quinn, could you give me a little bit about your service? Talk to me about what path that you're on right now.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. And thank you to Minority Vets for allowing me to be a part of this space this evening. Once again, my name is Quinn Galloway Salazar. I am an Army veteran. I served in the Army Reserves from 2001 to 2006. Cool. I'm also a spouse to a combat veteran who teases me all the time because he served 27-ish years in the Army as a military police officer. So, you know, I always get the jokes of I did 6 weeks compared to 27 years. But nonetheless, my journey has been a very colorful one, which has led me to work in the realm of behavioral health as it relates to service members, veterans, and their families. I'm also a doctoral candidate. I am finishing up my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology with a focus on women veterans transitioning into the civilian workforce.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Quinn. And Marcy, could you just give me a brief description of what's going on with you now?
So I spent 5 years on active duty. I was in ROTC. That's a funny story about how I ended up in ROTC. Maybe that'll come up later. But I'm an ROTC person, came in active duty because back then everyone went on active duty. It's not like it is today where you have a choice or, you know, whatever the process is these days. So I did that for 5 years and then I got out. And I always wanted to come to DC. I had came here once in high school. I always joke that what's wrong with everyone in DC is we watched way too much West Wing growing up, and that might have messed us up a little bit. It's like that some days. Most days it's just, you know, hard work on behalf of the American people. So good work for hard work. And so I came to DC right off active duty. responding to Hurricane Katrina, surprisingly enough. That's how I got up here. I was a logistician, quartermaster by trade, and then I wanted to switch to civil affairs. The Army wouldn't let me, so I went into the reserves and went straight to a CA unit. I'm still in the reserves, assigned to the CENTCOM region most of my career, but now I'm actually over at the ILE, intermediate level education, where we train our majors to be operational level leaders. So that's my part-time gig. And then I kind of fell into work over at DOD doing sexual assault prevention and response when that program was first standing up. And as you can imagine, for a lot of us, that was, a watershed moment, because unfortunately I had colleagues who had things like that happen to them. So it was nice to be able to do that kind of work. Did that for 8 years, ultimately becoming the Air Guard program manager for their SAPR program, and then heading over to the Army Sharp office to lead outreach for them. And then I finally got my break at the State Department. It was kind of like my dream job. I had always wanted to work there, had kind of given up on it actually. And then a job opened up focused on women and girls in Middle East, North Africa. I had led the Female Engagement Team program for RCE's Regional Command East in Afghanistan. And so, and I had deployed with some people who were in a position to kind of help me do well in that interview and put in a good word for me. And so that's how I ended up at the State Department doing women and girls work. Unfortunately, gender-based violence is a huge problem globally, definitely not just in the US or in the military. And so what I've learned and was able to do in the Sharp SAPR program has linked itself very well to my work at the State Department, especially responding to the crisis of ISIS and the ISIS survivors in Iraq and Syria. So that's kind of like, my path in a nutshell.
There you go. I was very inclined to call you ma'am because I saw your lieutenant colonel status. So I was like, maybe should I call her, LTC? Because when I served, I was I was assigned to a lieutenant colonel, and, the highest respects for you. So thank you so much for everything. And Kayla, could you give us a little description of what's going, your service and what's going on now?
Sure, Lucy, thank you so much. And thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on with these other really incredibly inspirational women leaders. I was also in the Army, so not a very diverse panel on that front, since all of us are Army vets, but I served on active duty from 2000 to 2005 as an Arabic linguist on the enlisted side of the house. And when I got out, used my GI Bill to go to graduate school. Then worked at RAND, which is a think tank, for about 8.5 years, where I gradually shifted my research portfolio from intel policy to include more of a focus on veterans, because in my free time, because as women vets, we cannot apparently physically just sit still and do nothing, not capable of that. I was doing a lot of advocacy, and I realized I wanted to align my professional life with my personal passion. If I was going to be investing so much into something, I'd worked a lot on issues related to women in combat. I'd been doing a lot on the sexual assault and harassment work. I'd done a tiny bit on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and really just wanted to bring that together. So ended up gradually shifting my research focus in that direction, was able to work on the huge study that RAND did on sexual harassment and assault, work on the transgender study, and continued my activism on the side. Did a little bit of work also on some campaigns, and was honored to be an Obama appointee running the Center for Women Veterans at VA. And a while after the administration changed, I went back to think tank world, where I spent 2 years running the Military Veterans and Society program at the Center for a New American Security. And I'm deeply honored to be back at VA now under the Biden administration, where I'm currently running the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs. It's a stretch for me to really shift focus from doing a lot of research and policy work to doing more of the public affairs and communications work. But I felt like my background positioned me well to be able to tell the VA story in a compelling way by bringing in the data and the facts that I've been, raised to care about very deeply, but in a way that tells stories, which my background also as an author I think hopefully comes into play. So trying to play on my strengths and bring together, once again, like tying together the things that I think I'm good at and the things that I'm passionate about in a way that could set me up to thrive professionally.
That's awesome. I mean, I think using everything that we learned personally and bringing it to the table, I think that's what makes us so authentic, so unique. So thank you so much, Kayla, for that. So I'm going to start with Marcy. And my first question is, what was your North Star like throughout your career? What keeps you going? And what is that continuum for you look like?
It's going to sound corny, but I've just been really, really lucky to have meaningful work. I'm just not one of those people who was going to be able to just do something until they're 60 or 67 and just be making money. Obviously, we need money. You know, we do live in DC. It is what it is. But but I needed to have meaningful work. And so I love what quartermaster logistics gave me. I tell people all the time, like the things I learned in logistics, I use right now at the State Department in everything that I do, because that's about customer service and who is my customer at any given time, depending on the position that I'm in. And so I knew that I wanted to do international relations. I knew I wanted to help people. I had always done a lot of academic work on women's issues, either women in the Middle East or, the lack of women in American politics when I was in undergraduate school. So I don't know that I thought that that would end up being my career, but it has been, and I'm so thankful for that. So I think having real meaning in my work and feeling like I'm really contributing to a better world, and I'm sure, drinking the Kool-Aid in the military, is helping kind of fuel that fire as well. So that's what I would say would be North Star.
And I love the way you translated, your quartermaster experience, that logistics, and you're bringing it now into the civilian sector, because you hear so much and so many times that folks have a really hard time translating what they did in the military to, civilian work. So thank you for bringing that up, because again, it's something that we foster, and that continuum, we're continuing to follow that planning. Kayla, could you give me the same kind of, what's your North Star? What keeps you going?
I'd say my North Star is I just want to leave it better than I found it. Like everything that I touch or do. And it's the sense of service that Marcy talked about. And for me, another really important component of that has become service in community with others. Like the ability to work towards a shared cause. That is one of the things that made military service so powerful and meaningful in many ways. And that's something that I continue to be drawn towards, both in the advocacy space and then also professionally. It's really fantastic to work at VA where, I'd say over 30% of my coworkers are fellow veterans, and people are just deeply committed to the mission. Folks could be making a lot more money in the private sector, but they do this because they care about it and it means something.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla. I mean, it's truth that, you feel that compassion, you want to give back, and it works that way. It works wonders. And Quinn, could you give me your take and what's your North Star and what keeps you going?
Absolutely. I love how you started this conversation saying we could just be ourselves. So I'm going to say it. When I got ready to come off of active duty, I said, I'm taking this darn uniform off and I'm done. The universe said, you're not done. My North Star essentially has been saving lives. Coming off of active duty in 2006, I had the opportunity to run a call center, working with families that had service members at Walter Reed. And I had the opportunity to really take a glimpse into post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, suicidal ideations, and it opened up a new world for me. I often tell people I didn't choose this work chose me. And even though I took the uniform off almost 16 or so years ago, I could not see myself doing anything different. How can I not continue to serve those who put that uniform on to keep my family safe? It's been a humbling experience working across criminal justice systems and working across federal government systems, all as it relates to service members, veterans, and families. But I have to say, saving lives is at the end of the day, my North Star and my why.
Yeah. Thank you, Quinn, for that. And, again, it's like, it's a calling, like within us, I mean, all of us here are Army, and it draws you back to it. You want to give back. And it's amazing, regardless of all the pain that, my traumatic experience caused, I still want to give back to my community. I want to make sure that that sense of duty is there. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. So, Kayla, I'm going to start with you. And what is your expectation and versus the reality of life after the military?
I think, actually what Quinn said resonated. I think when I took my uniform off, I thought that I would walk away. I really felt like I'd be done with it. My spouse was at Walter Reed. He had sustained a penetrating traumatic brain injury and was still recovering. And so I was kind of dragged back into that world because I had to advocate for him as a caregiver. And I also have written a book about my experience. And so, what I thought was like, okay, I'm going to do this and then I'll put the book out there and then I'll walk away and I'll be done. But realizing that I had this privilege to have a voice, I couldn't just give it up and walk away from it. And it seems like every time I say, okay, I'm done with this, I want to do something else, shift my energy, it just pulls me back. And I have to just have confidence somebody else is out there trying to save spotted owls, because this work has chosen me and I cannot seem to quit it. Maybe not a great answer, but yeah, that's the biggest thing. I guess I thought when I got out of the military, I thought I was going to go to grad school and then work at the State Department. And it just kind of became clear that that was not the direction that my life was going to go. I was an Arabic linguist. My spouse was like, I'm not living in the Middle East. It's like, well, I guess I better find a domestic policy to work on. And this is how I landed.
Thank you, Kayla. And Quinn, could you give me the same? What's your expectation, reality?
Oh my gosh. So coming off of active duty, I was hoping to join the police department. That was one of the reasons why I joined the military. I had a trajectory to do the military, law enforcement, go to the FBI. That was one of my goals. But once again, that wasn't the plan. And so I realized that the straight path that I thought I was going to take was not so. And while serving, my MOS was finance. So I got off of active duty and I'm thinking, I'm a veteran, I'll get hired fast, right? And I remember my first interview and sitting in that interview with civilians, and they were looking at me like, we don't know what you did in the military. It makes no sense to our environment. And for me, I was looking at their environment and I'm like, I was just working in a World War II barrack, and you all are riding around the office on razor scooters, and you have margarita machines. This makes no sense to me. So nonetheless, I decided to go to grad school, right? I went to grad school, and at that time I was working with military families, and I realized that my new trajectory was focused on counseling and behavioral health. And since then, I've just been following that direction. And kind of like what Kayla said, I took a brief moment where I said, okay, I'm going to do something different. It lasted less than a year, and back into this space I've been. And so it's been a reckoning and making peace with this is where I'm supposed to be, because there are so many other veterans that look at us as leaders and look at us to say, we can do it too. And so if that's the calling that is on my life, who am I not to live up to that expectation?
Awesome. Thank you, Quinn. And Marcy, what's your reality expectations?
You know what? I don't know what I expected. Because I was definitely one of those people. I was doing 4 or 5 years and I'm out. I'm done. I got my college education. I got my master's. I'm done. But, frankly, all of us were getting called back because of OIF and OEF. So there was no point in me getting out. So I went straight into the reserves, and plus they were giving me a bonus. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. But I will say it actually was tougher than I expected it to be. Like, I missed drill one time. Like literally, I just didn't go. And I never do that. The one and only time I have ever missed movement, right? Missed where I was supposed to be. And so I called the next month. I was like, I'm just a little bit more depressed than I thought I would be getting off active duty. I got a job. It's really intense, right? That's Hurricane Katrina. So we were working like every single day of the week. So I'm sure that didn't help either. And it wasn't what I came to DC to do, but it got me to DC. So obviously I understand, what the universe was trying to do there. But yeah, it definitely was harder than I thought it would be. And so I don't underestimate how hard it can be for other people to make the transition, because you don't realize how much the military is doing for you until they're not doing it anymore. And you're like, oh, and I got to understand my insurance plan, and why so many pages? I still don't understand my insurance plan. And so I think I didn't know what to expect, and obviously that was my response. Obviously, I got out of it, and it probably is because I had a soft landing. I was in the reserves, so at least once a month, I was kind of getting my military. I hate to say my military fix, right, around people that really understand me and get me, because I had deployed. At that point, I was part of the invasion into Iraq, and so. And yeah, like like Quinn said, like no one can really relate to you. Like, how do you even explain things like that? And I know, civilians don't mean to be offensive, but they say things that are less kind of, weird. But they don't know. So you can't be mad at them. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. But that was definitely how I responded to leaving active duty. We'll see how I respond to retirement. That's next year.
That'll be our next panel. When you retire, give us a call. We're going to do a panel. Okay, retirement's on. Let's do the panel now.
I say I love that idea of that concept of a soft landing. I feel like my first job was a soft landing too, because I was working as a contractor. Like half my colleagues were veterans and half were native speakers of target languages. And it was the same thing. It felt like a soft landing because so many of my colleagues spoke my language. And so it eased the transition. I did that for a couple of years before I did something else with more people who introduced me as an officer, even though I used to be enlisted, because I just didn't even get the difference.
Yeah, but it's also awesome about just, this talking your talk. Like, you say something and then you see like someone's like, oh, you're military too. You're like, oh yeah, and it's like the camaraderie comes back. So definitely. So Quinn, I'm going to start with you with this next question. What systemic barriers did you face transitioning from the military to your career and post-military life?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones for me is coming off of active duty and landing into my first civilian job, hearing I wasn't refined enough, one, I was too rigid, two, and I was just too hard as a woman. And I internalized that for years, right? That was hard because when I joined the military, I was 18 and it was the only world that I knew. And hearing that, and I live in the state of Georgia, and I was told, well, we live in Georgia. The way we do things is sweet like a peach. And at the time I was brash and I'm like, if you're expecting that from me, it's not gonna happen, right? And so for a long time, I'll be honest, I stopped identifying. And I wore a mask. And I would be in the positions and would not share that I was a woman veteran. I would share that I was a spouse, but I stopped sharing that I served. And I remember the very first time I took the stage and I told that story, was the very first time that I felt empowered to start picking up that torch and letting the world know that I am a woman veteran and we are not invisible. And this is just who I am, accepted or not. But it took me a few years to get through that.
Thank you, Quinn, for sharing that story. It's amazing once you say your story, the empowerment it gives you. And thank you for sharing that with us today. Kayla, could you give me your take on systemic barriers that you faced?
I'd say one was that I could not untangle USA jobs. Like it defeated me as an Arabic linguist with a TS clearance and could not land an interview for a government job. Don't know to this day what magic key would have unlocked that, but that was one barrier. Maybe there's like a secret club where they teach you the secrets of USA jobs, but that was for me a big barrier. When I had my first job, I think being a veteran helped me overcome some barriers, because as a woman in national security, I would walk into a room, especially over at the Pentagon, and like get these looks like, ugh, what is she doing here? And if I would like recognize a combat patch and maybe drop a reference to being in Mosul in 2004, all of a sudden the attitudes would change. That was the secret key to unlock and get past some of those barriers, was actually my veteran status. But I definitely felt that it was harder for me to succeed because I was a woman, and just felt like I was constantly upsetting people's expectations. And, just like what Quinn said, I also got a lot of negative feedback about my communication style in those early years, had to do some recalibration. That was difficult. So in terms of like a systemic barrier, I'd say the gender norms and violating them. I feel sort of bad saying that because clearly like I have thrived, but it was hard. And I think I've definitely seen some folks whose careers advance a lot some men whose careers advance a lot faster than mine. And I do wonder, how things might have played out differently if I didn't have some of those barriers that I was, bumping up against.
Yeah. And Marcy, what's your, give me some stories,
Man, that's what's so interesting, right? Because, you have the military part. And in my current branch, there are not a lot of women, definitely not a lot of minorities. So we have, kind of some sexism things kind of playing out there. And then as I got rank, right, now it's, that I'm Black and I'm a woman, telling people what to do. In my civilian life, it's weird, right? So I do think it's helped me, especially given the kind of things that I've done, right? Worked at DOD, Air Force, Army, had the real world experience. And plus I was a sponge, right? I could really learn. But it is interesting, like she said, figuring out USA jobs, frankly, because the transition program at the time doesn't really teach you how to do your resume. They just say, apply. It's way more complicated than that. It's literally not that simple. But once you figure it out, you get referred. Everything is a referral once you figure out the system. But I, literally, I went to the library, got a book on KSAs, and that's how I figured it out. But I remember our white veteran, I'll just say veteran, I won't say what service. And I had a lot of respect for him. And me and his son were literally the same rank. And, I don't know any better. I'm out of a job. So I applied for the first job, that is available to me. It's a 9/11. I got out as a captain. Knowing what I know now, I know that I should never have taken that job. I should have came in at least as a 12 or 13. And I saw, frankly, because I was willing to take care of people too, right? I'm not going to screw people over just because I kind of got screwed. Making sure that they come in at the grades that's really appropriate to their experience. But I remember, because remember we were going back and forth between the grade system and the pay bands. And so we were going back to the pay bands because everybody was upset and thought they weren't doing well. At least the majority of people at DOD weren't doing well in that system. To be fair, our office was doing great because, as you can imagine, the SAPR office, we get yelled at a little bit, get yelled at a lot. So we were, hustle pretty hard in that office. And he's like, well, you're gonna go back to, being an 11. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not what you want for your son, but that's okay for me. And it's really hard not to see that as, having to do with my race or my gender. And then just a lot of civilians, they always got all these snide remarks, right? You got to be a veteran to, get into the government. When we all know all the jobs I have not gotten, even though I was a veteran. And then I guess my thing, when people say things like that, I know they don't mean to be offensive again, but they are. Like, if you want veterans preference, feel free to enlist for 3 years or more. You know what I mean? And you can get all the privileges you want. I don't know if you'll think it's worth it at the end, but if, it's that important to you, you can do that. So I've seen quite a few things in these 21 years of working. But, I kind of just pushed through it. Obviously, we shouldn't have to do that. Obviously, we're having a lot of discussions about diversity and inclusion these days, which I'm happy to see. So hoping that, the government and other entities will take it to the next level. But, sometimes I feel bad saying those things because I know they're microaggressions and things like that. And why should I feel bad? They should feel bad because I know some people have gone through way worse. But little things like that have definitely happened to me, and it's been disappointing. That's what I'll say. I've been disappointed because I expected more from them, and it turned out that they weren't who I thought they were.
Yep. But thank you so much, Marcy, for that. It's amazing. I'm not in the government sector. I work in the private sector, and it's amazing how I would think that veteran status would kind of help me, and it never does. And I really quickly have to always turn off the veteran hat and become either the woman or become la Latina or something else. And, you would think with all these intersectional values, all these intersectionalities that I have, that maybe one of them will make that equation work. And, it's just another brick wall after brick wall. So, it's just, I guess we have to put up we fight harder because of who we are. And, like what Quinn said, plenty of times I've been told that I'm not the polished penny, but, I wasn't a polished penny when I went into the military. I came from Jersey, I'm very soprano-esque. So, forget about it. That's when I'm going to kind of throw it in there. And then I just became even more brass after the military. So, polished penny, you want a polished penny? I could give you that polished penny, but you know what? I'm a little tarnished, and take it or leave it. That's the way I am. So, so thank you for sharing all your stories. But let's talk about challenges. What was your biggest challenge? And then what type of support mechanism got you out of where you kind of were in that rut? So talk to me about the challenge, and then talk to me about what support got you out of it. And I'm going to start with Marcy on that one.
Oh my goodness, challenges. Being open, right? So that's kind of going back to the story where, I'm an 11. Maybe I should have stayed there. Maybe I, be a 15 by now if I had stayed there. But I also knew that was not the kind of work that I was going to be able to do the rest of my life either. Just because, SAPR sharp work is just so intense. Like, I can't count the many times I had to close my door because of a case we had. But being open and being mobile, willing to move around. And I know some people, one time I heard one of my fellow colleagues I went to college with, she's like, oh, we always have to move to get promoted. might not be the worst thing. You know, I shouldn't have to move. If it's based off my race and my gender, that's wrong. But also, you know, if I'm trying to get myself ready for the executive service, I need variety in my career. And I'm not going to get all of that in one office. And so being willing to move, you know, being able to go back, because I've, you know, gone back a grade. I didn't lose pay, but I went back a grade once in my career, got it back quickly. You know, I always joke, Obama knew we were never going to get a raise again, so he really hooked us up, you know, the year after he left. And so I think being open has really got me through, I guess, the hard times when I felt like I'm doing all this work and I'm not really being compensated for it. But it definitely, especially as you're trying to move up, it's a pyramid everywhere. Government, private sector, military, it's a pyramid. Everyone doesn't make it. Some of that's because of structure, but some of it is just, we just aren't all gonna make it. And so I'm being open to whatever the universe has for me. And I think that has helped me be successful.
Quinn, tell me about challenge, support. Like, what did that look like for you?
I think one of the challenges that I faced, and that I sometimes continue to face, is my level of passion. And not everyone having that same level of passion, and having to dim my light a little bit, but then reminding myself that that's not okay, right? Has been a huge challenge. And I think in terms of support, I didn't really turn to support until I was ready to take my mask off. And I went to a women veterans retreat. And that was the first time that I had been around so many women veterans without being in service, that I realized, and I know tribe is really cliche to use, but I realized I wasn't alone, right? I realized that my traumas, some of the anxieties that I experienced, I didn't have to go through that in silence anymore. And that it was okay to be with like-minded minority women veterans and share my experience and feel that I'm heard and feel like I have a voice. And I always think back to that, and I'll never forget that weekend as long as I live, because I was able to truly sit and be true to who I was. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And those women will never understand how impactful they were in me being able to go back home and being willing to say, this is who I am, and it's okay. And I don't have to be that shiny penny from New York. Take it or leave it. And I still experience challenges, but I'm more willing and I'm okay with saying, yeah, so what? But I'm also badass on top of those challenges. And I take it every day. I take it day by day. And know that I have a strong tribe of other veterans that are there to always to support me when I need that support. And that's a humbling experience.
Thank you so much, Quinn. I could tell you, I have a very strong tribe of women veterans that I have met, and the way we can lean on each other is so, it's so, it's so, yeah, like you said, humbling. So thank you for sharing that, Kayla. Biggest challenge, and give me some support mechanisms that you've established for yourself.
I think for me, the biggest challenge has probably been trying to balance personal and professional obligations. My spouse's journey has been challenging to go through alongside him. We've been through a lot, and having kids, childcare. When we had 2 kids under 2 in full-time daycare, we were spending, I think, $36,000 a year on daycare in the DC metro region. Then trying to figure out like how to do it all, and feeling like I was always letting somebody down. Like when things were hard at work and at home at the same time, I felt like I was failing at being a wife and mom, and failing at being a worker, like at the exact same time. And like that was really heavy and hard to deal with. In terms of supports that helped, like Quinn, actually, I went on a Women Veterans retreat as well. That was really, really meaningful. It was the first time that I had left my husband alone for a week, since we had got married and he had been injured. And I was like, is he going to eat? He only ate sandwiches, but he ate. And that, helped me feel comfortable that I could do more. And I ended up in a woman veteran book club. It ended up being a wine club, and now we're just a group chat club because of changes in life and then COVID and everything else. But we really supported one another through like weddings and divorces and breastfeeding and people coming out. I mean, just all kinds of things. We've just been there for each other in a way that I, have not really experienced anywhere else. It's that tribe of other people who understand. And I will also am not ashamed to admit that I have definitely reached out for professional help. I've gone to therapy. I've done a course of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is really super helpful, like learning some of those techniques. I've gone back to therapy when I needed to, and I've tried to be really candid about that and say, like, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I needed to reach out and get some support when things were really hard, because there are things I just could not do on my own, right? And we feel that way about physical fitness. If you want to really get to that next level, you're going to work with a personal trainer or work with a coach who specializes in what you want to do. And there's nothing wrong with doing that on the mental health side as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kayla. I'm glad you brought up therapy, going to get that professional help. Like I have to say, I think my therapist is on speed dial. God bless her. She's like, she must get like, she sees my face and be like, oh my God, he's calling me again. But, I do call and I do seek that. And it's really important, that self-care, that self-awareness, that self-love that you have to give each other is so important. So thank you for sharing that with us. So I'm going to start with a question of what was the deciding factor for you to pursue government pathways for your career? And what were your greatest challenges you faced, especially from an identity perspective? Quinn, could you give me that, like, what was that factor for you?
Yeah, so right before I jumped into government was when I had the experience of a supervisor saying I wasn't refined enough. And I was just finishing grad school. And I saw a job posted for state government that was focused on jail diversion and trauma recovery for veterans. And I'm like, why the heck not me? The worst that they can tell me is no, right? And I applied for it and I got it. And at that point, I realized working within government, I had the opportunity to help make high impact change, social change. Being able to help stand up the first veteran treatment court in the state of Georgia was huge work. But at the same time, during that phase of my life, that was when I did struggle with my identity. And it was also during a time where the peer movement was really big, but I still struggled. So what I will say is that even though I struggled with sharing who I was as a veteran, my passion kept the fire alive in the work that I was doing, whether it was in advocacy, whether it was in developing programs. It really kept me in sync to the work that I was being called to do. And so, you know, I think back to that time, that initial time where I was fearless, right? And it was one of those things of saying, I could do it all. I can do anything to support service members and veterans and their families. But I have to say, it's probably been the past maybe 10 years or so where I've been able to openly identify. And it's such a difference, right? It's such a load off of my chest. I have tattoos, right? For years, I covered up those tattoos. And now I walk into DC and I'm like, who's going to say anything to me, right? But it took a long time because a part of that is that military culture that the civilian world isn't always open to. And so just being able to say, this is my identity, this is who I am, but this is what I bring to the table, really helped shape the narrative of my career.
Thanks, Quinn, for sharing that. Yeah, it's really surprising. I mean, with the identifying of, you know, I'm a woman veteran, and, you know, the hiding of tattoos. You know, I have 11 of them, and you see me there, like, at, you know, trying to cover them in you know, spaces. But the other day I said, you know what, I'm gonna let everybody see them. What the hey? So, you know, I was on a Teams call, saw my arm, I was like, hey, there you go. So it is what it is. But Kayla, talk to me about what was that trajectory for you, and then greatest challenges you face, especially, you know, with identity.
Sure. So, you know, after being at RAND for almost 9 years, I felt like the good idea fairy, doing research for a government sponsor that maybe had left by the time we actually finished the report and got it through clearance and published it. Like, hello, I have these wonderful ideas for you, and I'm going to flutter off and somebody else gets to implement them. And I was like, I want to be the one who implements. I want to be the one who tries to drive that change from the inside, instead of just throwing out things that seem like great ideas from the outside and then not having accountability for bringing them through to conclusion. So that's why I was really excited to have the opportunity to go into government. It's a little bit different going in as an appointee than being on the career side. Identity-wise, I think one of the things that's hard is that when you are an appointee, you know, you represent the administration, and there definitely are times when I may have personal opinions that differ from the direction that leadership is going. And once you make that choice, and this is where I guess it is similar to the career side, like it's out of your hands, right? Like I can state in small group discussions, this is my opinion about what the policy should be, but if that's not where the boss goes, then my job is to execute. I will admit, in terms of, you know, how to kind of try to manage some of those challenges, I did at one point write down a list of like, here's what I would quit over, because I wanted to be able to go back to it and say, like, this is what, under these circumstances, I would just resign and protest rather than stay. And I think it's important to know what your bright lines are. And for me, I felt like writing them down gave me that accountability, so that I wouldn't, you know, wake up later and be like, I boiled alive in that pot because the temperature increased so slowly. I definitely, what other folks are saying has resonated. When I first started, I was no sleeveless with my tattoo show, and I was wearing foundation every day. I was getting my nails done. Really felt like I had to play the part. And then I gradually became a little more and more real, to the point that now I'm saying, like, I get mental health care when I need it, because I think that showing my authentic self is important for me, but also for the next generation of rising leaders, that they know that they can be who they are and still succeed and still thrive. And I have to be willing to be vulnerable to help create that space for other people. But it is hard. I mean, I went back in the closet when I joined the Army, and I didn't come back out as bisexual until like a year ago or something. Like, I was very much trying to play this part of what's the role that I need to do in support of everybody else's needs and the cause and this and that. And, you know, finally reaching a point where I could say, like, no, it's time for me to just sit in my own skin. For any of the younger folks in the call, like, turning 40 is definitely a big part of saying, like, yeah, This is it. This is me. It's much easier at a certain age. You know, I've just, it's run out of, right. I've paid my dues. And also it's easier to an extent when you reach a certain level, right? Like you have, once you've earned that seat at the table, it's a little bit easier to sit in your own skin and own where you are than when you're like hungry and trying as hard as you can to get to that seat.
Thanks, Kayla, for that. I feel I'm about to turn 50, and it's like, you know what, at this point, just let it all out, you know? What do you got to lose at this point? So thank you for sharing that with you. Marcy, I'm really looking forward to hear what you got to tell me.
Yeah. So I kind of, hinted at it, when I was doing my intro. Like I'm that dork because like no one in my family was government. Like, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. So most people work at FedEx. So everyone's private sector. And I had this really, I guess, transformational experience in high school here in DC and always wanted to come back. And I really wanted to just make policy on behalf of the American people. Most people aren't that, clear-eyed, that young, but that's really why I joined the government, wanted to be a public servant. I don't know that I understood all the politicals, and I understand it a lot more now that I'm at the State Department than I ever did before. And Congress, I just wanted to, work here and serve the American people and make policies that would really change people's lives. And basically using my experiences, right, to inform that, because I am big on, especially when we talk about women and girl work, sometimes you'll hear a lot of criticism about what that world looks like and that is, not very diverse. But I think my argument to that is, well, it can't be diverse if you're not in the room and you're not willing to have those discussions. There never will be any intersectionality if no one's there to educate people about why that's important. So that's kind of why I wanted to be a policymaker and work for the government. And then I would say about the challenges, it's a couple of things, right? So you guys are talking about being from New Jersey and New York. Well, I'm from the country. I grew up on pavement, but I'm from the country. Most places are in the South. My first big boss in DC was from Georgia, so I never did really lose my accent. And I don't know that I even want to. I like being a Southern Belle. I like the world, seeing the diversity of America, right? That we don't all sound the same, because a lot of my colleagues, white, black, whatever, like you only know that they're from the South if they say so, because they've already taken on that Midwest, dialect that I guess is supposed to be ideal for the international stage. And so I've heard a lot from senior leaders like Kayla and Quinn about just being authentic, owning yourself, delivering. So am I delivering the results for the American people? Ultimately, that's what matters. But I get all the time that I'm like no foreign affairs professional they have ever met. So most people tell me I should take that with pride, that people say that about me. Because, I'm learning, right? I've been there for 6 years now, taking the good, but I think there's also a lot to learn from DOD that other agencies can adopt. And so trying to bring that to my new home at the State Department. And then just the challenges, right, of being a public servant. And it'll be my 4th or 5th president. And to Kayla's point about what is a red line for you? And, who do I work for? And I work for the American people. That's who I work for. And, as long as I'm not asked to break any laws, obviously I was in a lucky position. It's really hard to do that, doing the kind of work that I do. But there's definitely been some tough days where there are decisions that were made that, or it looked like my leadership wasn't going to make the right decision. And am I going to be able to stay here if you are even remotely serious about what you are suggesting? I've been lucky enough that they came around. I don't know because I protested so much, but just always been able to communicate in a compelling way why our leadership needed to do what they needed to do. And that's kept me here working for the American people. And so hopefully that will continue. I hope not to have as difficult a period as, we had the last few years. But I probably should stop there before I get myself in trouble.
Thank you so much. So we're coming down to a few minutes. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you to just give me one word that you use to keep you going, that gave you that success, that feel good word that you want to share with others, that could make it true to your essence, your value. But what's your word? So if someone asks you, okay, give me a word that signifies what you've done and what you've accomplished. So Quinn, what's your word?
If I can get off of mute. Legacy. In short, I am in a position now where I serve 35 governors, and I'm a Black woman and a veteran. And I remember first entering the space and there were no Black women in the space. And now I get to lead it. And I get to help build suicide prevention plans across the nation for my tribe. That's my legacy. There's no greater work than that.
Thank you, Quinn. Kayla, what's your word?
Purpose. I try to live a life and have a career of purpose and meaning.
Thank you. And Marcy?
I remember they were talking about, how you describe yourself on LinkedIn or whatever. And so if, anyone's connected to me, I'm ardent advocate for women and girls. And so I'm passionate. I am not playing games. Like, this is not a game to me. I am dead ass about women and girls' rights here and overseas. And so anything that does not lend itself to that, I'm just not tolerating. I'm not playing, I'm not playing sexist games with my male colleagues, my friends, no excuses. And so ardent and passionate about that.
Okay. Thank you. So there's a question on Facebook Live. Jason, if you want to give us that question, that would be fantastic. Jason, because I can't find the question.
I thought it was just a comment.
Okay.
But while he thinks about coming on, can I just say, Marcy and Quinn, you're just so inspirational. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm honored and humbled by all three of you. This has been an experience for me, and I hope, I want to say that you're part of the tribe. You're part of my tribe now, in this experience, because you gave me thought process. I hope others feel the same way I did, that we are, we're telling you again, we're real, we're authentic, we're genuine. I think that's something that is conveyed. And I am very grateful that you guys shared this space with me. You did this for minority veterans. It means the world to me for others, for us to share what's out there, to share our wealth of knowledge, to share what we could do, what we are, and how we can give back to our community. So thank you so very much, all of you. I absolutely appreciate you, and I'm very grateful for what I shared with you today and what you shared with me. So with that, I want to say thank you so very much, everybody, for joining us today. And we have another Project Thrive coming up, and make sure you catch it. And thank you so very much, Quinn, Kayla, Marcy. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, ladies. Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.